And I was just completely inspired by their stories of like, just being vulnerable and crying together and just supporting each other. It was such a beautiful thing. And I was like, wow, I want to like replicate this and give this to women, because I truly believe by sharing our stories, that's how we truly connect with other people.
Welcome to the Juggling the Chaos of Recovery podcast, where we focus on health and wellness and overcoming all types of addictions. You're in the right place if you're a mom, dad, sibling, or caregiver who has a loved one who is or was struggling with an eating disorder or any other kind of addiction. In a time where everything seems heavy, I'm here to bring you a very real yet lighthearted take on what the heck we're all supposed to do with our lives while we care for our loved ones who are struggling. One thing holds true throughout it all: you can't juggle the chaos without smiling, at least a little bit. Well, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Moira Gorski. So glad you are back here listening today. Part of what I love to do in this podcast is to just offer hope for recovery, but just hope and empowerment for women, really for anybody listening to the podcast. And today I have a wonderful guest that is coming on today to talk about just that, empowering women and really just to be the best versions of themselves. And I kind of talk about that again in my wellness business, is that, it's never too late to take care of yourselves, and we should be able to live our best lives when we make some healthy choices and things like that. And Jennifer Ramirez today is a wonderful gal who is doing that, again, empowering women to be the best version of themselves, just regardless of the adversities that they've faced in life. And she has a nonprofit called and Rise, and she has a wonderful coaching business called And Flourish. So today, thank you, Jennifer Ramirez, for joining me today. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Moira, for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah. I'm glad that we met. We met through some networking, right, that we do in the area. And again, always thrilled to meet other people that are on a bit of a similar mission in helping people overcome their adversities. And again, like I said, realize that, your circumstances don't define who you are, who you can be. And as again, I've shared with many and many other stories, many times people are helping others because of things that have happened to them in the past. And I know that that's is your case as well. So I'd love to have you, again, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and kind of where you came from, if you will, and your story and why, because I know that story will start to show us why you are doing what you're doing today and why you're so passionate about that.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. Thank you. So it all started a long time ago. No, I'm just kidding. No, it did though. So I unfortunately went through childhood sexual abuse by my father when I was 7 years old. And, my mom found out and didn't do anything. So that in and of itself was pretty traumatic. And then also, we were just taught to keep it a secret. Don't nobody tell the family secret, right? So it was this big secret that I basically held in my entire life until I didn't. And now I'm very public about it. And I'm very happy that I have done that, because it's been very healing for me, very freeing. And just knowing that I'm not holding around this secret with me anymore. It's a good feeling. So because of the sexual abuse, I didn't have any boundaries, because I was taught that no wasn't even an answer growing up. So I had a lot of issues with friendships and just any type of relationship, really, when I became an adult, especially romantic relationships. My father is also a narcissist. So then I went on to, go into the cycle of dating narcissistic men who were abusive. I went through domestic abuse, emotional abuse, and even financial abuse as an adult. And it was really tough. I also was a single mom. I became a single mom at 21. As soon as I told him I was pregnant, he took off. So that was another traumatic thing that happened for me. Raising a kid alone, especially when you're that young, is very hard. And I struggled financially. I was really poor. I was living in a bad neighborhood in Chicago because that's all I could afford at the time. And I was just very unhappy. I was dating really bad men, not, very, very bad men. And then I used to just surround myself around bad people. Like, I wasn't a bad person. I'm still not, but I got into this point in my early 20s when I became this crazy party girl, but also I became a really big hard ass. And that was totally a front because I wanted people to know that I was tough. Because mind you, I grew up in the suburbs. So then when I moved to the city, I had to take a different stance on how I lived. I lived in a bad neighborhood, so I had to let people know I was tough, even though I don't think I really was. But I had to give out that aura that, don't mess with me. So I became a different person, but it was just a defense mechanism, right? And then it wasn't until I really like hit rock bottom. I was so poor and I was just so unhappy. And I was with these men that treated me like crap or cheated on me. And it was just always something. So it was basically I hit rock bottom. And then I was like, all right, I need to do something different with my life because, yeah, the sexual abuse was an unfortunate part of my life, but I have been making these decisions on my own, these self-sabotaging type of decisions. I did used to self-sabotage a lot because I didn't believe anyone loved me. I didn't believe I was worthy of anything because that's kind of how my childhood went. I was taught that my voice didn't matter. And I was taught that, my body was whatever for everyone to kind of take advantage of. And so, I had to kind of work through that. So I started reading self-help books. I started going to counseling, and that really changed my life because it gave me a different perspective on myself, on the things that I had been through. And it also kind of showed me like, you don't have to be stuck in this kind of rut that you're in. So I just really started pushing forward. And then that really helped me to kind of open my eyes to other opportunities. So then I started going to college and I put myself through college and I graduated about 2 years ago because I was still working my full-time job. And then I still was doing part-time college and raising my kid by myself. So it was a lot, but it was a huge accomplishment for me. And then I also, by the time I was 30 years old, I was 100% debt free. And then because of that, then all that money I was using to pay down my debt, I started using towards like, okay, I started Googling things and researching how can I grow my money? And then I started getting into real estate. And so I started purchasing real estate properties in Chicago. And then, that was kind of like my little side hustle aside from work. And then in 2018, I started doing these women empowerment events out of my living room. It just started out as a hobby because it was something I really enjoyed doing. I loved like empowering women. I was like, this is so much fun. And I love sharing stories and telling, people my story of how I got out of this horrible situation that I was in too. And then from there, I was just doing these out of my living room. But by the third event, we had secured a venue and we had sold out of 150 tickets on Eventbrite. That was my my light bulb moment. I was like, okay, this is bigger than what I think it is. I think I could turn this into a nonprofit and make it something. So I went forward with that. And I was still working my full-time job at the time and still in my last year of college when I was putting it all together. So it was very stressful, but it was something that I really still loved. So it didn't really feel like work. And then during the pandemic, not during the pandemic, right before the pandemic started and we went into the stay in place orders, I had quit my job to pursue and rise full time. And it's been a wrap ever since that. And, I just love what I do. I'm really passionate about helping women just heal and move forward. So I did start and rise because I don't think money should ever be a reason why women can't move forward in their healing. If they want to see a therapist or a counselor, I don't think, but they're underinsured or they don't have insurance or whatever. So I don't think that should be the reason why we can't move forward. So And Rise does offer free counseling for women in Illinois. And my long-term vision is to give free counseling to women in the US. And then even longer term vision is to make this a worldwide organization to help women all over the world. Because as you know, there's a lot of underdeveloped countries that still, there's still not a lot of women's rights. They still treat women badly. There's not resources for women and things like that. So that's why I created And Rise, and just to help women through like workshops and events. And, we do support groups as well. We do them in person and virtually. So if you're in another area, a lot of the women that we do serve are in areas that are they don't have these types of resources in their areas. So they're from more like rural areas or things like that. Or they just came to our support group and they really enjoyed it and they keep coming back. And then I also started And Flourish, which is my coaching business. I started a little over a year ago now. And I just help women more on a one-on-one basis or group coaching basis. And we're helping them work through their healing in a more in-depth way, I guess, than through And Rise. So just really helping these women with boundaries and forgiveness, not just of others, but themselves, accepting the things that have happened in your past, no matter how unfortunate. And then also just being able to leave it behind and move past it and, being honest about it with your coach and God, of course, and Flourish is faith-based as well. So, and we do incorporate faith and spirituality into the work that we do, because that's another thing that helped me in my journey along the way, is when I found God again and, really confided in him and helped him, or asked him to help me let a lot of the anger and resentment go. And that was absolutely life-changing. So God is a big part of my life now, opposed to when I first started all of this. So that is another big thing for my business that I really love, that I incorporated faith into it, because I think you got to have faith in something, in order to have that like hope or whatever. It's like, you have to believe in something,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
So that's how it all started.
Yeah. Well, it's a great story, and it's a great vision that you have for this, not just, you have a big vision, which is really exciting and just so inspirational as as we listen to that. I think there's a few key things too, even that you mentioned, that I wanted to point out that I've heard before, but I also heard one thing that I'm not sure if someone has stated it that way. You talked about, like, with the sexual abuse, like, yes, it happened, but now the choices that I'm making now are my choices, even though that wasn't my choice. I think that's a very powerful statement. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not easy, like, if anything happened, right?
And it took me a long time to realize that. I went through many years of me not realizing. And then finally, I think the counseling really helped me to realize, like, okay, what are you going to do now though?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that stuff happened, but it's up to you at this point. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make my life what I want it to be. And I did. I just went for it. I took a lot of risks on myself, but deep down, honestly, I knew that I was meant to do something big. I always had this hunch that I was meant to do something. I just never knew what it was until I founded And Rise. And then I was like, okay, this is it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so many people can learn from that, regardless of what it is that has happened. It's that, okay, but I'm going to take control now in a good way and make the choices. You said that, like, and again, this is something else I've heard. You said that, like, your mother knew about it, didn't say anything. It was a real secret. I just know I have a good friend who has shared what she now, believes about abuse, and she's been really shunned from her family. So, like, how did that, did that happen as you decided to come and speak about it? Or how was that when you did say, this is what happened and I'm going to start talking about it? Like, how were your family relationships?
I didn't. I just did. I didn't say, hey, by the way, is it okay if no, because I knew that if I were to ask them, they wouldn't want me to talk about it. But at the end of the day, before I decided to go public with it, I really thought about it, because it really was something where I was like, I was very ashamed about it at first because of who my abuser was. And I had a lot of guilt and shame. But then once I got past the guilt and shame, that, like, you shouldn't feel guilty. You did nothing wrong. You were 7 years old. You didn't ask for this to happen to you. Once I kind of like realized that, then it was like, all right, I'm just going to do it, because you know what, even if all of my family disowns me, at least I know I'm doing the right thing and I'm helping other women out there. Because there's a lot of people, it's not just women, men go through it too. There's a lot of people that go through sexual abuse, and it is very, very traumatic. And it's, for me, the more traumatic thing was telling my mom and her not doing anything, more than the sexual abuse itself, believe it or not, because I felt very, like, abandoned. And she did used to choose my dad over me and my sisters. So that was, I had a lot of issues with her. I was so angry with my mother for most of my life, and had a lot of resentment towards her, believe it or not, more than my dad too. And once I found, God again, I was able to let that go. I gave it to God. Like, just, you know what, like, I don't want to have all these bad feelings towards her. And it also helped me. Something else that helped me forgive her was understanding where she came from, what type of, childhood she had. And, the type of childhood she had were very conservative. Don't talk about anything. There's no feelings, and we don't talk about any of these things, and, keep it hush hush. That's how she was raised. And, and plus my dad was narcissistic. So I can imagine what he was doing to her, the type of damage he was, or the things he was putting in her head. So it made forgiving her a little bit easier when I tried to put myself in her shoes, and I am in the process of, like, trying to get her to go to, like, counseling and kind of talking all this through, because it's just on my heart. Like, I feel like she needs to know that her actions affected me in a very negative way as an adult, or not even just as an adult, just, altogether, as a person. So, it's just that we need to kind of work through that, but that's definitely something that I want to work through. Cause then again, that's something that I could help my clients, with, because a lot of people have issues with their families that, people didn't say anything. And like I said, I didn't tell anyone that I was going to do this. I don't even know what they know is out there, but it's out there, and I know I'm doing the right thing. So even if they get mad, I'm okay with it. I'm at peace with it.
Right. Yeah. There are generational patterns that, repeat themselves. We've talked about that on this podcast. There are, and when I've gone through some different courses and counseling and things like that, even one of the exercises we did that I think is pertinent to this is that we stood in front of somebody and we held a notebook up, or somebody held a notebook up. And so they asked me, what do you see? Well, I see blue, right? Because the notebook is blue. And then asked the person on the other side, well, what do you see? Well, I see tan. It's like, well, no, I mean, shouldn't it be blue? And it's like getting on the other side of the notebook. I bring that up a lot with, as I talk with other people. It's like just seeing, because the fact of the matter is, they see it that way. I see it this way. Neither one's right. I mean, neither one's wrong. I mean, we're both right, but it's like, but can we get on the other side of the notebook and take a look at that? And again, see what was your mother going through? And not that necessarily excuses that, but it gives some more perspective into, and
that's what a lot of people tell me. They're like, no, I'm not forgiving them. That, no, they did this and that to me. And I'm like, but it's not for them. It's for you. It's for your heart. Your heart's not supposed to be angry and hold all that resentment. It's so you can let it go and move on with your life, and it doesn't forgiving people doesn't mean that you're excusing their behavior, what they did to you. It's just, it's just forgiving them for what, for whatever, and being able to move on with your life. And I think that's the most important thing. But a lot of people get stuck on, but they did this to me, but they did that they don't deserve it. It's not for them though. It's for you. So you don't hold it.
Yeah. Forgiveness isn't about the other person.
And you don't even have to tell them that you forgave them. You don't have to tell them. You can do it in your heart and move on with life.
Right. Yeah. I often have done different meditations kind of in the morning, and done that type of forgiveness, walking through, even like I have it on my wall here, that, how do you say it? The Hawaiian Prayer that, I don't know if you know about that one, but it's basically, it's saying, I love you, please forgive me, I'm sorry, thank you. And it's just kind of going through, as you think of somebody and going through and saying those things. And it can be so freeing, again, to have, to go through that forgiveness type of thing. It's so freeing for you. And like you said, that's the most important thing, is to try to free up your heart, and what they choose to do from there is their choice. But
absolutely.
But that's all that we can control, really, is what we, what we're doing, the energy we're bringing into the room. I also want to talk about just that idea of community, like the fact that you it sounded like you just said, just come on over. Let's be together. I want to share my story. Maybe you have a story. And I have to tell you, I mean, everybody's got a story after 120 episodes or whatever I've done here. Everybody has a story. And as one is not, there's just, everybody has a story. And the fact that that you did that, you provided this safe space for women to come and just hear other people's stories, because I think what I find is that when we hear other people's stories, it gives us permission to tell our story and to feel okay about, oh, well, I guess my story is not, like, maybe I should share that. And when somebody tells you that your story inspired me to do something different or whatever. But I love that idea that you just, for whatever reason, invited women over and provided that space.
Yeah. And they really enjoyed it. And I was like, wow. I mean, just because I had been to an event that gave me the idea to start doing those women empowerment events out of my living room. And these women were just sharing their stories. They didn't even know, I didn't know that any of these people. I knew one person there, maybe two. And I was just completely inspired by their stories of, like, just being vulnerable and crying together. And just supporting each other. It was such a beautiful thing. And I was like, wow, I want to like replicate this and give this to women, because I truly believe by sharing our stories, that's how we truly connect with other people. Because a lot of the times, especially as women, we don't talk about things, we don't want to bombard people with our problems or our stories, or it's too much, or people won't understand. But when we hear the person sitting next to us went through the same exact thing, you're like, whoa, okay, so I'm not alone. There's just so many people that go through, and it's just, I know that I've like resonated with so many people by hearing their story. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I should connect with this person because we have so much in common. You just never know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And storytelling is very, very powerful, more than people realize.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a lot of like different events where we're like, let's just share. And people are like kind of weird at first. I don't know if I'm ready to share. But then once they see other women being vulnerable and sharing their stuff, they're like, okay, I can do it. It gives them that courage to. And then once they say it, there's a lot of women too that's like, I've never talked about this my whole entire life. So the fact that I'm able to like come here and get it out, it felt so good. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm like, yeah, I know it sounds cheesy, but I always say healing is revealing. We reveal these secrets. It's not eating us up inside anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Let it out.
Yeah. And I also was raised in a very conservative, English Christian home, and we didn't talk about the bad stuff. And, I've said before on this podcast and to others, I mean, that's really what kind of led to my struggles in college and my eating disorder, is that I just didn't feel like I didn't have that confidence to make my own decisions, as I went away from home, where we just kind of followed what mom and dad said. But I also didn't have that. Like, I didn't feel like it was safe for me to say, hey, I'm having a hard time. And, because I would, comparison's always been one of the things that I have struggled with. I looked at my sister who was at my college, a couple of years before me, and one that was older than her. I mean, they all seemed to be so much smarter and doing so much better than me. And so what was I can't share that with my parents. And
right.
Because again, but when I look at it and I've looked back on it now and have gotten past all that, it is that's what I was shown. And when I look and I've known about my mother's past and my father's past, like that's what they were shown. They just they just went forward and they did it. They didn't talk about like, well, this really stinks that, mom's got to go to work now, that grandpa or dad decided to buy, like in my mother's case, my grandfather decided to buy this 80-acre farm when my mom was in high school and moved him out to the country because he wanted to do that. Well, that ended up being that my grandmother had to go to work. And there was my mother stuck as a teenager. Like, she kind of became the pseudo mom for her younger sister, and she had to like take on all these responsibilities. Yeah. And you just did it. Right. Yeah. And so, again, it's good to look back and to have that perspective. But again, I know that that's what I was modeled, that we just don't talk about the bad stuff. And I love that. Again, you help women find their voice. That's one of my big things the last couple of years, is for me finding my voice and just figuring out how to have it find my voice in like it's a good way, because sometimes you find your voice and you're so pissed off, or you're hurt, or you're so like, and you don't even, it just comes out as like attacking the other person or something. And it's not easy to do that when you don't know how to do it. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that what's also, important for maybe women to hear and that could help women is just like, if somebody's listening to this and they feel like they're or they know that they're in a abusive situation, or they just like, but they're really scared. Like, what would you tell somebody like that? Like, what could they do if they feel like they need to get out, or they need to make a change, but they're so scared about, like, what would you tell somebody like that? Yeah, definitely. Especially if it's an abusive relationship, you definitely have to come up with a safety plan, a good safety plan. And there are resources that I could give women on that too. Like there's nonprofits that specifically help women with safety plans that are like domestic violence type of nonprofits. I'm not an expert on safety plans. I just know that you have to have one, especially if, this person is consistently, abusive, physically abusive to you. You have to be really careful, because
if they're physically abusive, then it could get worse. I've heard stories of, these people trying to kill the person that's trying to escape. So you have to be really, really careful about it. And I would just also say too, to just have faith, that when you do the right thing, you'll get rewarded for it. I truly believe that. And I think, just pray, pray for God to kind of cover you with, protection and all that stuff, and just have faith that he'll help you get out of that situation. But there are a lot of resources out there for women that are not just in domestic like abuse situations, but, sexual and emotional. There's a lot of different things out there with tons of information or hotlines or, just escape plans, like I said, things like that. So there are a lot more things than we probably even know are out there now, as opposed to maybe like 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot out there, but now there's a lot of stuff. So that there's definitely resources and help available. So don't feel like you're alone. That's another big piece of advice. Like, don't feel like you're alone. Tell somebody you trust, what you're planning on doing too, making sure that they're a person that you can really, really trust, that they have nothing to do with the other person. And, because sometimes we think that it's a safe person and they're really not. So just being really, really careful about that before you go and disclose. And if you think nobody in your life is safe, then don't say anything, and maybe go to, like, they have what are called victim advocates. And they help you if you have your specific, they're kind of like a counselor, but they're not like a licensed counselor, but they're victim advocates that help victims of abuse or victims of sexual abuse or whatever. And they help them, with a plan or with resources or anything like that. So that's something definitely I can share after the podcast, or just give you like a link to several.
Yeah, and we can put that in the show notes. Those are good things and good tips. I was involved in Wheaton Junior Women's Club for about 10 years in my area here. And, it's a wonderful organization that raises money and gives scholarships, and then supports other businesses in the areas. And I know that there's a couple of safe houses in our town that women live in, and they're safe. So there are definitely, and I also want to make sure we say this too, because we were talking with, it just came up the other day, like somebody shared with me something that was going on with their friend, and they're like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be telling you and all that. And I said, you know what? And then they also said, I don't know if I should be telling him like what I was seeing. Like, I think, and I said, you know what? I think, make sure that you do, because sometimes that's what a good friend is that you point out what you're seeing, because sometimes that person, and I know and I shared with this person my own case when I was dating somebody and not in a really good situation. And that person had shared with me that if I ever needed to get out, which I didn't think I was ever going to need that. Yeah. But she said, if you ever need a place to come to, you can always come here. And when that guy came this close to hitting me, I packed my bags and I walked out of that apartment so quickly, and I went to her apartment. Yeah. Still gets me. That was a long time ago, but that was a friend that said, you know what, I'm here. And she, I think she saw that I needed to get out, but I needed to come to it on my own terms. Yeah. But I knew it was so comforting to know, even though it was so many years ago, that when I walked down those stairs, I had a place to go to that was safe, Definitely. And I think that as a friend to those people, we need to make sure that we offer that and say, hey, whatever, I love you, whatever you choose to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of the times we think people are confiding in us to get advice. And a lot of the times they just want you to listen. And a lot of the times they just want you to say, I'm here for you. It's okay. Or like you said, just offering, hey, if you need somewhere to go, something happens, you always have a place here. And you also mentioned too, like, just being honest with them. Sometimes people need to hear it and it might not go in, it might not, they might not register it, but at least you're planting the seed. I always think there is a lot of power in planting a seed. So a lot of people are not ready. Just like me, I had to go through a lot of stuff for me to finally get it, and everybody does things in their own time. You can bitch and complain, all day and tell them all these things, but if they're not ready, they're not ready. So just, making sure you're planting the seed and being truthfully honest, because I believe that good friends tell the truth. even if it sucks, even if it hurts, even if it's mean or what, not mean, but like it's something that they don't want to hear, because anybody could act really nice and be like, pretend like things aren't happening. But a good person, a friend's going to tell them what a family member would tell them,
Right.
And
Right.
I believe that. And I think that it's important.
Yeah. And I think that again, when you're in an abusive situation, be it emotionally or physically, like you feel like you don't have the power to step out into, and I know that for myself because I felt very controlled by this person. Yeah. And I even remember saying to my girlfriend, yeah, well, this was my plan, that I was going to move in with him and we were going to get married and all that. And it was falling apart. But I was like, but who is going to love me after I've lived with this guy? Who is, and, my friend was there to say, hey, you're a lovable person, but I didn't feel that good about myself. So I didn't even, again, like, why would I leave? Because my future doesn't look that good. Right. So, again, I think that friend can tell you, tell you differently.
I've been there. Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah.
Where people will be like, well, what are you doing with this person? Or he's this, or he's that. And I'm like, no, he's great. What are you talking about? And I just had to go through it on my own to get it. But, it's always good still that that, okay, well, they did try to tell me, so they did have good intentions. And even at the moment you might get mad about it, later on you'll realize, okay, they had good intentions. They didn't want to see me suffer or go through this stuff with this person. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you shared things today. And again, so that we can have this, again, we can hear, people can hear stories, but also people have these resources of things that are out there. And for sure, what you're doing, tell people where they can find you. And I definitely will put this in the show notes as well, but make sure that people know where to find you, Jennifer.
Yeah, so you can visit the And Rise website. So the website is www.womenrisechicago.org. And if you want to reach me directly, my email is jennifer@womenrisechicago.org. And to visit the And Flourish website, which is the coaching, it's www.andflourish.co, not com. .co. And then if you want to reach me through there, it's jennifer@andflourish.co. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I'm all over social media too. So if you want to add any of that, you can go to those pages and you'll see links to add us on like Pinterest and Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah. Thank you. And again, it'll be in the show notes so people can just click through there as well. Any last words to those that are listening that you want to share?
Yeah, just take it a day at a time, especially when you're healing from something that has happened to you. Be graceful to yourself, because healing is it's a long journey. And this is the way that I explain it to people. It's like having a wound that's infected. And it stinks, it's gross, and you have to clean it and it hurts and it's uncomfortable. That's exactly how I describe healing. But as time goes on and you keep taking care of it and cleaning out that wound every day and cleaning it, it's eventually the infection goes away, and then it becomes a scab, and then it gets uncomfortable again. You think you're good, and and then it starts to get itchy and uncomfortable. And that's exactly how healing is. You think you're over a hump, and then something else happens, but it is. The other side of healing is so beautiful, and it's so worth it. And so many people are scared of pain. We live in a society that's taught us that pain is not okay. And pain, I think, is like necessary to learn and to grow, and they think that pills cannot solve everything these days, like the way they tell you, like, just take a pill for this, take a pill for that. You have to really heal yourself from the inside to see improvement, so no matter how hard or difficult or uncomfortable it is, that's always how we grow, is being in uncomfortable situations, and how we learn more about ourselves. And so just take it a day at a time, and, give yourself credit for the little baby steps. A lot of people don't, they do these little things or take a different step, and they're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. They try to downplay it. And I'm like, no, we got to celebrate these little things. It might be a little bit, but it's still something. It's better than where you were yesterday. And you always have to, forgive yourself for, maybe allowing abuse to happen, or maybe staying too long. There's a lot of people are like, I can't forgive myself. And you have to. That's a big piece of the healing, is forgiving yourself, being able to, again, let it go and move on with your life, and it's definitely worth it. and always here as a resource if anybody wants to just tell me their story or talk or ask questions or anything like that. I'm always here. Always willing to listen, always willing to just, be there in any way that I can. So yeah, use me as a resource. And we do the support groups. There's a lot of things that I do to help. So definitely take advantage of those things as well.
Yeah, there are some great things out there for people too. And I love that. I've heard that before. When pain is there, when pain arises, it's there to teach us something. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to look at the pain, even though it'll be painful. So I love that infected wound thing. Mm-hmm. So thank you again, Jennifer, for being here and sharing all of this. I really do appreciate it. I know the listeners, this will be a great resource for them too. And again, thank you for coming back to listen, listeners. Please do share this because we know that there are so many out there that are not in good situations and that will need to hear this. So please make sure that you share this podcast with others. Come back and listen for some other wonderful episodes, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, head over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. Share it with others and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. I've got a tribe over on Facebook, so head over there and search for Juggling the Chaos of Recovery Podcast Tribe. And do you know somebody who has a story to share, a story of recovery and hope? Please let me know, as I'd love to feature them as a guest on one of these next upcoming podcasts. And perhaps you're looking for a community of like-minded, collaborative, and supportive people who cheer each other on as we strive to improve our lives. If that sounds like something you've been looking for, schedule some time with me. You'll find the links in the show notes. Let's talk, and let me help you find your way. And I'm here to tell you that you're worth it.